Thank you for joining us. David Heurtel in for Elias. Google has announced that it will block access to news content for Canadian users in response to the Federal Online News Act. This legislation, recently passed by the Canadian government, requires tech giants like Google and Meta to negotiate deals with Canadian news publishers to compensate them for their content. To tell us more about this ongoing situation, happy to be joined by Paul Deegan, President and Chief Executive Officer of News Media Canada. Welcome back, Paul.
Thanks, David. Great to be with you on CJAD.
So, Paul, tell me, what's the situation now? Because, you know, when you hear about these giants, I mean, look, I read recently, I think Apple's market cap is bigger than the entire GDP of Canada. So when you have these giants saying, you know what, I'm not going to do what you want me to do, what can we do?
So Google is actually playing ball.
Okay.
So the government negotiated a deal, and I have to give full credit to Pascale Saint-Onge, the Minister of Canadian Heritage. So she cut a deal with Google back in November, where basically they will pay news businesses $100 million a year, and that's indexed to inflation. And the split on that is about 63% for publishers, 30% for the private broadcasters, and then 7% for the CBC. So where we're at now is Google has selected a collective to manage the $100 million. And from our perspective, we just want to make sure that everything is on the up and up, that the integrity of the act is respected, so that everyone gets their fair share under the act.
How do we get to $100 million? How do we get to that number?
So that was a number that Google and the government negotiated.
Okay.
We would have preferred, frankly, if we could have done that negotiation, but that was a number that they came up with. But then within that, it was important to the publishers that, you know, we get sort of our fair share of that. So we wound up with $63 million of that.
I mean, not that, you know, 63 million is anything to sneeze at, but at the same time, is it close to the value you think is fair? Does this represent an amount that you can work with here? I'm not saying you should refuse it, but I'm just trying to find out, is the ideal number 500 million, or is that right on target?
So we really look at it on a per journalist basis. And, you know, around the world, all these agreements are subject to non-disclosure agreements. So it's kind of hard to figure out exactly what value is. But the New York Times, for example, their deal worked out to about $19,000 per journalist. But that wasn't all on a cash basis. I gather there was some in-kind and product and all of that as part of that. So if you look at the deal for us on the publisher side with $63 million, if the rules are followed, if the CRTC enforces the rules, this should work out to 20,000 Canadian dollars per journalist. And from our perspective, that's a very respectable number.
So that's a very interesting answer. I did not know that this was the way you could calculate this. So it's on a per journalist basis.
And the money is actually divided up based on the number of full-time equivalent employees. Now, the math can get funny, and this is where we need the CRTC to step in. So, for example, an employee is someone who, you know, gets a T4, for example, right? It's not someone who you're paying $200 to write an article for. So we need to make sure that the rules are followed and enforced by the CRTC. So we're calling on them to make regulations or put conditions on this agreement to make sure that the rules are followed and respected.
What about the other players? Meta, Apple, where are the negotiations with them?
So Apple actually isn't subject to the act just based on sort of the volume of news.
I see.
But Meta is subject to the act. But under the act, you can either, if you're not prepared to pay for news, then you cannot surface news on your platform. So Meta's actually blocking news right now. They've been blocking news for almost a year now. And we hope they'd get to the table and you know, be more socially responsible like Google, but thus far we haven't seen any signs of that.
So, and this is a per year deal with Google?
It's per year, and it goes in perpetuity, and it's indexed to inflation. So, you know, from our perspective, you know, 20,000 a year, indexed to inflation in perpetuity, that's a very reasonable number.
So this money, I mean, what do you think the impact will be? I mean, will it maintain? Will it allow to grow our local newsrooms? I mean, what do you think this can do?
Yeah, I think it'll definitely help maintain jobs and hopefully grow jobs. We've seen some amazing innovation, and just in your market in Montreal, La Presse, for example, which is headed up by Pierre-Elliott Levasseur.
Yeah.
I mean, they've done a terrific job. They've got, it's run as a not-for-profit now, but they've got, I think last year they had 56,000 donors who donated over $7 million. They actually turned a profit of $13 million. So if you look around sort of who is a successful news business in North America and frankly in the world, I think innovators like La Presse are a great example. And I know from talking to Pierre Elliott, I mean, he intends to put, this money to work in his newsroom. Some of the English publishers had existing deals with Google where they were getting, I think, somewhat respectable money. La Presse, for example, didn't have a deal. The Quebecor papers, the Journal de Montréal and Journal de Quebec, for example, they didn't have a deal with Google. So this is net new money that they can put in and invest in their newsrooms to hire and maintain journalism jobs.
I'm running out of time here, but Paul, I want to have your take on AI, because now in the U.S. there's now this added layer of negotiations about the content being used by AI and compensating for that. Or how are discussions on that front?
So discussions, we've had some discussions with some of these companies. This is still sort of new for them and new for us. Obviously, we should be compensated, right? I mean, the AI is based on a story that a real journalist has done.
Exactly.
Has been fact based and fact checked, and we should be compensated for that. There's no question. So. Those negotiations, whether they're done on a per publisher basis or a collective group of publishers, we'll see how that all unfolds. But definitely we should be paid for the value of our content.
Paul, really appreciate your time this morning. Thanks.
Terrific. Thanks so much, David. Take care.
You too. Paul Deegan, President and Chief Executive Officer of News Media Canada. Let's go to your CTV News update with Trudy Mason.